All right, we are just about ready to get started, so please everyone take your seats and settle down. We'll see how spicy it is. It's going to be interesting for sure. They're just deciding what to talk about now, but I give you Stephen, also known as Destiny, and Eliezer, and yeah, I'll leave it in you guys' hands.
Hi, I'm Eliezer, the original person who thought that maybe AI alignment should actually be solved and not just pointed out as a problem, starting in about 2001 or so. Got my start as a public intellectual on a blog called Overcoming Bias, started by Robin Hanson, the inventor of prediction markets. He would be a lot more famous in my world than this one, I have to say. The literal inventor of prediction markets. And anyways, something called the rationalist community, not to be confused with the ancient philosophical position that all things could be derived via a priori knowledge. And long-time person who thought that prediction markets were just the obvious way for a high-functioning world to do things. And unfortunately, like, the prediction markets are also what tells you if you are implementing the wrong policy as a planet or country. So if you're on a planet where the prediction markets themselves have failed or been outlawed, it has no way of correcting any of its other problems. As fellow Earthlings, you probably find this description familiar.
My name is Stephen Bunnell. I am the premier intellectual socio-political commentator on YouTube with the best political opinions, the most correct political opinions. And I'm here as an outsider observing this very unique community. I have to say it's been a lot of fun getting to know a lot of you guys, talking to a lot of you guys, and seeing how you function. And I'm here today basically to retire Eliezer on all of his AI opinions in an epic one-on-one showdown.
There is, however, a prediction market on what will first generate interesting debate between us, and I do propose that we at least give the top option on it a shot, where excluding other. So, how to culturally institute or enforce a put your money where your mouth is ethos, although, okay, there, which of course goes to 51% as soon as we actually say it out loud, but well, if we specialize
Before we do
on
this, I'm curious, can you tell the viewers at home and for people in the audience that might not know, and maybe me, how do you resolve these markets? So let's say we have the conversation. If you bet yes on that, do you automatically win, or does somebody have to decide if it's a good conversation, or how does that work?
I started this market, so I think I get to decide what constitutes an interesting
okay, all
conversation
right.
between us. But, you know, if the audience screams at me, then I will, like, you know, respectfully consider their opinion and whether I want to believe them or not.
Okay, sounds good. So this first thing on putting your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, my prediction is that this will not work because I think that we just kind of agree that you walk up to political figures who are saying falsifiable wrong things and ask them to bet on it, and hope
You think I would say that?
and then hope that they stop being wrong instead of that they stop being falsifiable.
How much would you put on that?
That you would say that? Well, I'm more guessing that you won't take a position incompatible with it.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm messing with you. I think being an alternative media figure who stands sometimes in opposition and sometimes with mainstream media, and then sometimes in opposition of and sometimes with alternative media, one of the things that frustrates me the most about alternative media people is there is very little accountability for being unimaginably wrong over and over and over again. And one of the things that I noticed is, I think there was a few years ago, I think somebody else in my audience gave me this idea, but now anytime I see somebody say some outlandish or crazy stuff, I'll say, oh, you think that Trump is going to win in a 50-state landslide. You seem really confident on that. How much money would you put on that? Or, oh, you think that, this war is going to be over in 2 weeks, or you think that this person is going to be elected to this office. And I noticed that it's like one of three things happens. Either one, the person fucks off immediately and they don't talk to you anymore. Or two, the person very rarely will actually take the bet, although with far less odds than they originally seemed to imply they'd be willing to take it. So, for instance, somebody will say, I'm 100% positive this is going to happen. I was like, oh, really? Will you give me like 50 to 1 odds on that? They go, no, maybe 1 to 1. Or the third, and actually this is kind of optimistic. The third most endearing thing that happens is as soon as the money comes out, their opinions magically moderate far more than they would have before the money comes out. Somebody will say, I'm 100% sure that in 2 years from COVID vaccines, everybody's going to have, a sixth finger. And you go, really? How sure are you of that? Like, would you bet, $25 on that just so there's like a public accounting of that? And they're like, okay, well, that might happen, but it's probably not that probable, right? All of a sudden, their opinion starts to map onto reality a lot more, which I think says more scary things about their predictions, because it seems like now they do have an accurate model of what could happen in the world, but they just weren't forecasting that out loud until money became involved. So I'm a big fan of, here at Manifold, you guys use, play money, which as much of a joke as that sounds, apparently is doing really good at being predictive of things happening in the real world. But I'm a big fan of having a public ledger, basically, so that when somebody says, I listen to X, Y, or Z political figure, I can look up somewhere and I go, oh, well, that guy lost the last 52 bets that he made on electoral outcomes. Maybe this guy's political opinion is dog shit. I like that.
This matches all of my own experience, including with challenging figures to bets. I will just say that when somebody challenged me to 150 to 1, I think it was, on aliens, UFOs, having a world model breaking origin, I took them up for 150,000 of that. So I walk the walk. All right, so I think this topic was a failure because we don't actually disagree. This is like how this is how politics should be done. We both try to do it.
Well, here's a question. I'm curious, okay, and I'm a radical on this because I've been in online political stuff now for so long. I'm a big fan of a lot of accountability because no matter what I do, I'm always held accountable. Do you think there should be like a forced market that if you want to be some sort of social or political commentator or AI or anything, I guess, if you're entering opinions into the public domain, should you be compelled? We'll say culturally for now. Should you be compelled to be tracking these bets somewhere?
I think that introduces a bias toward legibility. And I think that sometimes things are legitimately harder to legibilize. Also, there's a huge problem with betting on the destruction of Earth in particular. But leaving that aside, we actually also, Brian Kaplan and I tried to overcome that by having Brian Kaplan, like, give me $1,000 and then I owe him $2,000 if the world doesn't end, is that basic theory.
Wait, what's the, I've had that idea before. For doomsday people, it's like, oh, well, let's just do, like, loans that expire past your supposed expiration of the Earth. How do people engage with that? I'm curious.
So I'm very unsure about timing. And I do not have like a doomsday date, and I do not want to leave my neck hanging over a cliff if things take longer than one might expect, as one might well expect, as it were. But Brian Kaplan had at the time like won all of his bets, so I figured it's some cheap insurance to bet Brian Kaplan that the world won't be destroyed by 2030, because Brian Kaplan always wins his bets.
Okay. Well, that's +1 for the non-doomerists then. What's the next topic?
But there's like a whole bunch of other things like, can I tell you what large language models are going to be doing next year? Can I tell you what image models won't be able to do in 2025? And I've sometimes guessed on that. I've like sometimes bet on manifold prediction markets about it. But ultimately, I think that what is predictable about this is mostly the endpoints and not the trajectory there. Like, it's much more predictable where things end up than how they get there. And if you overly fetishize legibility, I do think that you then run into a cultural problem about that, where like the people whose theories make the most legible predictions might get all the crowd attention, even in advance of those predictions coming true. Do you want to try turning off your microphone while mine is running? Aha. Test. Wait.
Oh, hey,
Te-
went away.
But now I'm no longer liked, am I? Oh, there I go. Okay. Well, no, I've been like turning mine off while his is running, so he might also need to turn off mine while mine is
Testing. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Maybe we'll see.
We'll see.
Wait, can I? I'll challenge you on that. I feel like trajectory, I feel like, is about as important as endpoint, no? Like, couldn't one make the argument, like, the endpoint of planet Earth in 100 million years is to be engulfed by the sun, right? I feel like trajectory and timelines are...
I bet against.
You bet? You think trajectory is not as relevant?
No, I bet against the Earth being engulfed by the sun in 100 million years.
Am I...
Or a billion years, or whatever it
Sure.
is.
At some point, that I think, doesn't the sun grow and threaten our orbit and we fall into, or...
There will not still be a sun around at that point, or there will be a very carefully preserved and honored ancient sun, which gets fed continual doses of hydrogen to keep it alight. One of those two things. Either it's been like consumed, or
like
it's been carefully preserved. But either way, it doesn't expand and swallow the Earth.
Okay. Is this part of your AI model, or...?
I mean, it's a very generic part of the AI model. I think that many people who are not AI doomers would, like are on board. Like Robin is over there raising his hand. So, not a doomer, but there's something much more general than doomers, which is just like technology keeps going, and you are eventually either eating the sun, or you are carefully preserving it, but you're not just letting it go its natural sequence on the stars, because that is just like leaving a lot of value on the table. If you're not specifically trying to preserve Earth's ancient sun, it is full of hydrogen you can use for other stuff.
Okay, true. Missing the point, though. But, well, okay. I hadn't considered the Dyson sphere ending for the sun, or the siphoning of energy off it, sure. But wouldn't you argue that trajectory of problems could significantly change the way we ought to perceive them? For instance, let's say the trajectory of AI taking over everything was 2030 versus the year 3000, right? If the sooner that trajectory lands, the more imperative it is for us to confront that problem head on, maybe even at the expense of dealing with other problems. Whereas if this is a problem that exists 1,000 years into the future, things like nuclear war or dramatic climate change, threatening agriculture on the planet, like these other problems take a more front stage presence.
I agree. I am happy to say not 3,000. Or like if Omega drops by tomorrow and it's like it was either 2030 or 3,000, I'm like, oh crap, it was 2030, and with like pretty high confidence. I bet Robin Hance would also agree with that one. So not a doomer position either.
Okay. All right, I've milked that topic for all we got. What's next?
Well, what were they currently betting on?
Was it the FDA one?
No, FDA got put down. It was high before, but now AI risk is on top. Okay, somebody just bet up FDA. We could either dive straight into AI risk or do FDA. Like either one is justifiable depending on how we're following the advice of the prediction markets, I think.
Okay. What do you prefer to do?
Well, let's try the FDA in case AI risk sucks us in and never lets us out again.
Okay.
So FDA, like I don't literally think that the optimal course of action is to just completely burn down the current FDA headquarters and make no effort to have any kind of institution spring up to replace it. It might be better than status quo, but it's not the optimal outcome. I think for optimal ones, you do want to like have some, like a couple of private institutions that are, purporting to certify drugs on an actually, evidence-based basis rather than ritual studies. So, like you can keep on examining people and then like have a running probability, ideally even a prediction market on what some long-term retrospective on it will show. If your civilization is functional enough to have prediction markets, you definitely don't need the FDA. There's just a prediction market on what this drug will do among the people who take it. Possibly conditional market on what happens to them if they don't take it, so you can tell the difference. And if your civilization can't have prediction markets, I do think that having like the obvious like ill-advised consumer goods store where you can go to get products that the FDA doesn't like is a very straightforward improvement over status quo. And probably so is just like burning down the FDA and letting everybody figure stuff out for themselves.
So my trust or my desire to have these third-party institutions that sign off on things is that I feel like humans are intrinsically, it's part of our nature, we're very bad at evaluating certain types of risk. So one of those types of risks are things that happen in the long term. So for instance, if I can do something that makes me happy now, like eating a candy bar or doing crack cocaine or something, in the future, these might have deleterious effects, but I don't really care as much because my brain's just not wired to think of information like that. do you worry that in a world where people are just kind of left to their own devices, that certain types of goods or services could appear that people will start to short-term consume that could lead to long-term very bad effects, akin to like the San Francisco zombie markets or whatever I've seen, where you've got a lot of whole alleys full of people that are standing on tranquilizers doing nothing? Like, do you ever worry that could be a long-term outcome for large groups of people?
It's the long-term outcome of our present policy. Like right now, we've got people going up to the to the medicine counter in the supermarket and buying medicines labeled homeopathic. That is the situation with the FDA. Right now, we've got people addicted to fentanyl. That's the situation with the FDA. So does this situation we have people playing the lottery with the FDA. So given that this is what our civilization already looks like, do we think that these addictions get much worse, that they get diverted to more destructive pathways than homeopathy, fentanyl, and lottery tickets, and like the whole world? Do we think that it gets much worse if we literally just abolished the FDA and made no good effort to replace it with other institutions? And to me, it looks like people actually have a lot of the irresponsibility that they want to buy in today's world. It's not obvious to me that they buy worse forms of irresponsibility. It seems to me more like instead there's like a whole new crop of actually useful things once the FDA is no longer like squatting on the position of like the country that does the pharmaceutical research.
You don't think there's a scary world where obviously we have trouble with prescription drugs right now, or things that are supposed to be prescription that people take off-label or that people consume illegally? You don't think that if those drugs were just made freely available at every Walmart, CVS, Walgreens, that the consumption of those wouldn't necessarily increase? You think it would be about the same as it is now? Just challenging your idea that if we got rid of the FDA right now, things would be about the same or better instead of about the same or potentially dramatically worse. Because I feel like I could see it getting dramatically worse.
Interesting. Yeah, well, if we had a prediction market about that. So, do you think that if we legalized heroin, if we decriminalized all the drugs simultaneously, do you think heroin usage spikes?
I think that if it were to spike, I think that there are some social safety rails that exist where it's hard to draw a one-to-one thing from legalization to consumption. So for instance, if you legalize heroin right now, does everybody run to Walgreens and buy heroin? I don't think so, for a variety of reasons.
I think a lot of people who were buying fentanyl then buy heroin because heroin is now safer.
Sure.
But,
yeah, that's possible. But I think the long-term, kind of the scarier effect is you legalize it, the stigma around it severely decreases, and then it becomes seen as kind of like another potential option from the pool of drugs that you can choose from. Like, I feel like, these are our feelings, okay, I don't know if there's a prediction market on this, but I feel like when children are, I say children, I'm sorry, I'm 34, when college young adults, I'm so condescending, I'm sorry, I hate, you're 22 years old, I probably hate you. But anyway.
You young ones.
I'm sorry, yeah. If college-aged adults, when they're choosing between drugs, it seems like right now, your socially acceptable drugs are alcohol and marijuana. Like, those are the two ones where, like, if you say, like, oh, I smoked a joint, generally people aren't going to look at you like, you did what? You know? Generally you're okay there. I worry that in an environment where everything is decriminalized and you kind of have your choice of drugs, there are other drugs that maybe, like, would it be that crazy to smoke a little crack, to do a little meth, try a little heroin, right? Would it be that insane if the stigmatization goes away? And then the issue is that once you've tried some of these drugs, because the drugs themselves are transformative experiences, it's hard to be a person that just tries heroin one time and is like, I did it, it was cool, and now I'm done. After you've tried it, you're like fundamentally altered in a way that the trajectory now for your use is very bad. So yeah, I guess, so if you legalize it, is everybody going to the store today? Maybe not, but maybe like 10 years from now, it's like an option that people consider more than they would have in the past. But
well, if this were a political bargaining table, I think I would like immediately offer you the political bargain of what if we keep the sort of like recreational drug schedules in place, but all the stuff that like claims to, make you less asthmatic or something, we're just going to decriminalize all of that. So, like we're going to keep the anti-heroin laws and maybe even like have fentanyl still be prescription controlled, but all the asthma drugs and all the new asthma drugs that anybody wants to offer, we're just going to like clear out the FDA and only leave the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms administration, or whoever it is that would obviously take over then.
I mean, I'm sure there are people here that know more drugs than me, but isn't the scheduling for a lot of that, isn't it based on what can you make from these drugs? Like, so for instance, for asthma drugs, isn't the worry not that like somebody's going to, puff on an inhaler 50 times and get high, but that they could like take the ingredients from that and then use that to create like other types of drugs? So.
We'll even give you pseudoephedrine. But but all the just like mundane drugs that don't have a recreational use downstream of them, we're just going to like clear the FDA out of all of that and turn it into a complete free fall, make no institutions to replace it. I then claim that as improvement over status quo, not the optimal, but improvement over status quo.
So I'll entertain the hypothetical. Let's say it's all we're not talking about creating new drugs. Then the question becomes. So I'll ask you the question. I'll give you why my hope is destroyed, and then maybe you can help me, okay? Because I am doomerism on some things, especially post-COVID. Jesus Christ. So let's say that we have those drugs available. I imagine that an FDA counter-argument would be, well, there are these drugs, and they do have therapeutic uses, but the issue is that people are bad at identifying if the side effects are worth it or not. So somebody might say, like, well, I went running 10 miles yesterday, and I felt out of breath, so now I'm going to start an asthma treatment. And there might be negative side effects to that the person suffers. And then, so the question would be, I haven't talked to anybody here about vaccines or anything, because I don't want to start those fights. But is it brave of me to say that I believe in vaccines here, or what is this audience? I'm not sure. Okay, all right, okay, Jesus, okay, yeah. In an environment where it seemed like people were running into a lot of issues with things like ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, evaluating the efficacy of drugs because it became less about the drug and more about like a social or political group you belong to, do we trust that same group of people that are following Joe Rogan for medical advice to be making good decisions when they go to the pharmacy about like, oh, maybe this is a good drug for me, and then on top of that, sorry, I'm stuck, and then on top of that, to make those same decisions for their children? Would we trust people to do that?
So I admit that like it might be hard for me to, from my perspective, like doctors will be like, well, here's this list of side effects, and if you ask them, well, what is the probability of this side effect? They look at you like you're from Mars. You've just like given up trying to talk to doctors about numbers. So, like, are there like people out there who are so badly off that they would be a bit better off with doctors? It's just like hard to imagine. And it could be the case. It's just not clear to me that you're actually going to have these like hypothetical adversarial organisms that like suddenly spring up and specialize in like telling IQ 80 people to use the wrong asthma medication, and that like they prefer these people to the doctors who could go on flogging their stuff, or to GPT-4 which with a bit of training I bet can be taught to put numbers on things, unlike doctors. So I think that my like actual bet in the prediction market is that the hypothetical adversaries have better ways to exploit people than to compete with doctors at telling them to take the wrong asthma medication. I could be terribly wrong, and if a prediction market said so, you would want to actually build alternative institutions before completely abolishing the FDA.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be interested to run the experiment. I don't know at the end of the day. I could see a world where people are talking to their neighbors more. They're more conscientious because you're evaluating things because you have to as a necessity. You don't want to be taking drugs that have bad effects or whatever. But then I guess also in the world we live in now, I can also see people saying that this drug, if you rearrange the letters of the name, it looks like Soros, and I can never prescribe this to my child because it's going to make him grow an extra arm or emit 5G radiation or some shit. But I could see it going either way. It'd be interesting to test it. But that's what prediction markets are for, huh?
I am inclined to say that this was a sufficiently interesting conversation to settle the prediction market. Does anyone in the audience want to boo that? Does anyone in the audience want to yay that? Yay! Okay.
Okay, hold on. Well, that was a good example. Wait, that was a good example of negative priming, okay? Because you primed these guys. You gave your opinion first as the owner of the market. You said, I thought that was interesting. Does anybody dare boo me, okay? You're like, everybody says you're the smartest guy at this conference. Who's going to stand here in the audience against you?
Oh, I wasn't ceding my own judgment of the market to the audience.
Oh,
if I
my
was going to have the audience judge the market, I would have clearly stated that in the description. I was just doing a sanity check on my judgment.
Okay. This is how it starts, all right? That's all I'm saying.
No, hey, prediction markets transmit definite observables back in time. The only thing they can transmit backward in time is something you can definitely observe later. Was this actually fun and interesting is like not actually something you can transmit backward in time. You can transmit backward in time is the market creator's opinion of whether it was fun and interesting, or whether the market, and that is like standardly what it means if I haven't specified any other way of settling it.
Okay. Just saying.
No, I agree it's a potential problem, but you know. All right, so where do I actually settle this here market? I have an option to settle. I'll figure out how to settle it later.
We've got to settle it now, or else won't everybody mess it up? Or?
Yeah, if staff wants to settle it on the FDA one. Okay, should we now go to AI risk?
Sure.
Okay, because, you know, it seems pretty possible to me that in a couple of years, like all those people who are worried about going for the fentanyl or the like wrong asthma drug if that was legal, they might go for the Lilim.
The what?
The Lilim.
Can you? Because somebody there, I think that guy said he didn't know what you meant by that. Can you explain what that is?
Oh, so you know, Lilim, children of Lilith. In some interpretations, succubi.
Gotcha. Okay.
But there's another way to pronounce LLM, and you know, I'm a bit worried about like how those start interfacing with humans in a couple of years. You're worried about addictive stuff. You know, like I'd say that if the FDA was abolished tomorrow and you wanted to prevent as much addiction as possible, you know, like first worry about LLMs in a couple of years, and then worry about that pharmaceutical market that just got deregulated.
Sure. So I'm going to ask. I'll just ask general questions, and I'm sure if nobody else might.
Sorry, and a couple of years is not remotely precise. To be clear,
Okay.
could be 3 months. Could be like 5 years.
One thing that I think people here, the normal people, not you guys, because every person I've talked to here does like AI or ML research. It's like wait, I'm actually so curious. Hold on. How many of you guys work in something like AI or ML like related? Okay, yeah, decent amount. That's kind of weird. Okay. I wonder sometimes. No, okay. So here's a question. A lot of people have heard this thing is going to be the next thing in 5 years. I think I've heard about self-driving cars like almost since I was in college. That we were right around the corner from it, and it seems like today we're no closer than we were in the past. Or that the next version of ChatGPT or I know art generators were really big for a point in time, and now at least probably not talking about it as much. If there was somebody hypothetically that said, okay, you're saying this thing about AI, but people have said this about all technology, and it's always 5 years away, and Elon's been talking about Neuralink, and it's not happening, and blah, 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 blah. What would be like the one or two most convincing arguments you'd have for them that, well, this time it's different, this is actually a threat?
Timing is much harder to predict than endpoints.
I agree, yeah.
I was not in the self-driving car brigade. I was like, you know, I obviously was going to get solved eventually, but it wasn't clear to me that it was going to be solved and legalized before the end of the world, though things on the legal front are now looking interesting. Things on the technology front are allegedly looking interesting. I haven't checked in detail. It's much easier to, like, in 2001, I did not predict that this stuff was going to become an issue in 20 years. I predicted it was going to become an issue eventually. In like 2004, I sketched out a scenario for how the world ends that involved a superintelligence cracking a special case of the protein folding problem. I could not have told you that like the general case of the biological protein folding problem was going to be cracked in 2020 by AlphaFold 2. Like I could not have timed it. Might not even have been confident that you could like predict biological protein folding in full generality as opposed to like choose a special case and engineer it. I definitely wouldn't have been able to predict that it could be done by, you know, deep nets. Though AlphaFold 2 is legitimately more complicated than just a giant stack of deep nets like an LLM.
Do you think on the velocity thing, on the trajectory thing here, the first topic that we talked about was getting people to bet on outcomes as a way to kind of hold people accountable or make better predictions. Do you think that to some people, they would say that it feels unsatisfying that you can make such strong predictions about the endpoints of AI if those endpoints could be outside of everybody here's natural life cycle. That if this is happening in 200 years, I don't really care about it. I don't even want to think about it. Whereas if this is going to happen in like 15 or 20 years, it suddenly becomes like the most pressing thing for anybody to think about.
I would far bet on 15 or 20 over 200 and possibly on 10 over 20. But that is much more me eyeballing things. That is me looking at like how fast things have gone, and at the fact that GPT-4 got further than I expected the entire tech stack to stall out at. Like I was expecting like GPT-3 to mostly stall out, and then GPT-4 did not. And maybe GPT-4 stalls out, but I don't know anymore.
What do you think what are technologies that people that are hesitant to believe in I don't want to call it doomerism because it sounds dismissive, but for people that don't think it's as big of a problem, what are the technologies that they should be eyeballing where you could be like, look at how insane that is? Like it is moving quickly. It is going to be a future problem. Like,
I mean, again, timing is hard. Like synthetic biology. If somehow AI were not being a thing, I would tell people to worry about like synthetic pathogens such as COVID-19, but worse. Like, it's like a pretty gloomy fact that we like had the big synthetic pathogen disaster, and like the reaction to this was that like half of the United States doesn't want to take vaccines anymore. I consider it a blow against the theory that your like small disasters will successfully immunize civilization against large ones. But yeah, synthetic pathogens can clearly get much worse than COVID-19. I think a bunch of people are worried about AI specifically enabling that. Even if AI were not going to be a thing, I would still be like, that's a thing to worry about. If AI were not going to be a thing, I'd probably start to worry about who's not having kids. If we're going to be around that long, but we're not, so moot point.
okay. Was this a satisfying AI? where else do you want to explore on this one? I feel like how do you get, well, I'm curious. Okay, I want people to be interested in things that I care about. So I feel like for politics, now we sit on the other end of that as political people, whereas you're unwilling to put a timeline on anything. Political people's timeline is always like fucking tomorrow. This is the most important election. This is the most important problem. This is the most important piece of legislation. If you don't pass this, everything is over. Do you ever feel like a compulsion to push something ahead where it's like, hey, I know that this is like a fingerprint, but like, like you said, like 10 to 15 years, is this something we really need to start evaluating more? Is there anything like that? Or are you just like content kind of doing like the more theoretical side and, either believe me or don't?
I mean, if somebody were to dig up my manifold prediction market record, you would find that in the market on whether we're all dead in 2030, which resolves NA in 2027 to avoid the usual problem of is your model worth anything if the world ends? No. But, if it resolves NA in 2027, you can get like temporary boost by anticipating how other people will trade. So there's hopefully some incentive to like try to guess the right direction there. It's ultimately unbound from reality, of course. This is not a true virtuous prediction market, but it's hard to get those. Anyway, you would find that I initially placed like a limit order that was sell at 80% and buy at 40% for everyone dead by 2030. So unless I lied, unless I like poison the well by making non-epistemic trades and not announcing the fact, like you can tell that I don't think it's like all that likely to be very, very far out.
Okay. Are we satisfied?
But with this topic?
Yeah,
that's up to you. I obviously have a not literally infinite, but unbounded supply of things to say in the sense that if I said all of them, I would have thought of more by the time I was done.
Sure. Well, what's next on the prediction market list?
All right. Let me pull it back up again.
Or actually, no, wait, real quick, because I'd be interested in hearing you say it. What is, I can think of in a general sense of an answer, but I'm curious, what would you say is the more specific threat that makes, the more unique threat about AI as opposed to other technologies in the past?
It's smarter than you. Uh-huh. That's it. Like all the other technologies in the past, people are trying to like choose what to do with them on a basis of choice that doesn't include everyone on Earth, including them being dead. AI is choosing to do with itself. It's doing so using a more powerful ability to steer. It understands reality better than you do. Not right now, but in the predictable place it's going. Understands reality better than you do, makes better choices, goes outside the box better, has more of a spark of creativity, of invention, of like creative, unexpected uses of the world around it, better at manipulating you. You to it are an object whose rules it knows better than you understand yourself. Yeah, all of that. That is not something that was true of electricity.
Okay. All right. What's the next one?
Well, unfortunately, it's all got, I think, scrambled by so moral claims are truth apt was on this list. Do we want to do that? I kind of don't want to do that. Do you want to do? All right.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Are newborns conscious?
How are we defining conscious?
Qualia.
How do we know?
Guess.
I feel like if I were to say a baby is a pea zombie, then half the people I've talked to on my stream would probably fit the same criteria. So I feel like babies must be conscious. But I'm curious, what is your argument to say they're not? Yeah.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying that half the people on your live stream strike you as having less cognitive complexity than a newborn baby? I'm concerned. I'm wondering if there are AIs in this group.
Newborn babies are at least willing to learn. I'll say that. Yeah.
I see the snark. I'm guessing it's just snark, and you don't actually literally mean.
I'm getting closer every day to believing it, but for now it's snark, okay?
Okay,
Yeah.
so because, like...
No, I believe that people are fully cognitive, conscious creatures that are not philosophical zombies if they're smart enough to be operating a microphone and talking on a computer, yeah.
Okay, so...
Back to the babies,
Well,
yeah.
Babies can't operate a microphone and talk on a computer, so there you go.
Well, they can speak into a microphone.
Not deliberately. Well,
Okay,
anyway,
this is true, but I feel like most of the time I've spent talking to Ayla has been configuring her microphone, so I don't know if microphones are the best argument for cognitive capabilities. No, okay, tell me, why do you think babies are conscious? I want to hear it. Let's hear it.
Oh, my guess is that babies are not conscious.
Yeah, why?
Because I think there's a bunch of like reflective circuitry of like identifying the ape that is this ape. That sort of like looks at your own internal cognitive process and looks at a piece of it and says like, this is a thing this is like a reified thing in the ontology, where if you imagine it, it then like causes a little piece of that cognitive process to be there. Like if you imagine a red thing, some little red appears in your visual cortex or an area downstream of it. This makes it seem very unlike an object in the outside world. You can't quite see how any number of atoms could ever add up to the thing that happens when you send your brain a instruction like visualize red. It seems like no matter how much you imagine atoms bopping around in your mental workspace, in your imagination, a little sense of redness never appears the way that it appears if you instruct yourself to imagine redness.
So I understand what you're saying in terms of, if I think I understand, that it's hard to imagine qualia, but why would we imagine that babies don't have it?
Well,
Versus,
what I'm saying is that, like, if I look at the processes for having qualia that it's hard to imagine atoms adding up to, my guess is that the babies aren't running it yet.
Yeah, I get so, because I've done more abortion debates than I care to recall, but it feels like when you're looking at the ability of something to deploy a conscious experience, what we're looking at is, because we can't really see one anywhere, or I'm not aware of any way to observe a conscious experience, it seems like we're looking at kind of like the underlying mechanisms, and we're trying to make a guess of, is there enough like circuitry communicating with each other and functioning at this point such that there's some conscious experience that's happening on top of it. And I feel like I don't know what is the significant alteration of brain mechanism that's changing as a baby goes from birth to 2 or 3 or 4 that would make you think that like now it's got the proper parts for conscious experience, but before it didn't.
I'm not sufficiently a student of developmental neuroscience and developmental psychology to take a guess as like where in 2 to 3, or even if it's done by 2 to 3. Mm-hmm. Though to be clear, like I'd be less surprised if a toddler was having conscious experiences. But what I was trying to do is like describe a guess of why qualia feel ineffable. I was trying to describe a guess of a mechanism whereby qualia feel ineffable. And then like it's complicated. And as long as consciousness appears to you like a blank mysterious substance, for all you know that blank mysterious substance could be inside babies. But it's not going to turn out to be a blank, mysterious substance. You don't have to believe my guesses about it, but to believe that, like everything else in history that seemed simple and opaque, like life itself, if it's just this like mysterious animating force of flesh, then for all you know, bales of straw can spontaneously generate flies or mice. But as soon as you understand like what life is, there's this enormously complicated machinery behind it. And consciousness isn't going to have that much complicated machinery behind it. It's going to be built on top of standard brain stuff. But like babies are quite simple. So the more you know about what consciousness is, as soon as you know that there's a particular mechanism, you're going to be like, oh, babies are too simple to have that running yet. Give them a week at least.
Could one challenge you? Because I'm not going to. Well, no. Couldn't I challenge you on that and say that it does feel like consciousness is a special type of thing that we might be able to draw a circle around all of the knowledge a human could ever possess, and understanding like the fundamental nature of consciousness, just because that is our frame that we view things through, that understanding that might just exist outside of that particular circle, and it's something we can never truly fully comprehend.
Like eyes are the one thing that you can never look at.
Well, but you can look at eyes in a mirror, right?
Yeah. And, if you'd grown up in a civilization that had already unraveled, like what makes consciousness feel so mysterious, you'd have like grown up thinking of it as no more mysterious than life itself and the mysterious vitalic force.
Yeah, I agree that there are definitely things that exist that we didn't know before, that we do know now.
Yeah.
But it feels like I say this, I guess it's not true, but like even in the past, we could envision ways to test for a lot of things. Like where, does blood keep you alive? Are germs real? Is string theory a good explanation of quantum mechanics? Like we can imagine all of these things, and we can try to, pose questions for like, how could we test for this particular thing? But it feels like conscious experience is a truly unique thing where I couldn't even imagine a way to test it. Like, let's say that I showed you, I imagine you would think, or maybe you won't, I don't want to put this in your mouth, but I would imagine that if you could create a sufficiently complex computer, you should be able to get everything working such that a conscious experience somehow appears there. I would imagine if you could emulate yeah, but then the question would be, let's say that we feel like we've done that, how would we know if there was one there or not? I can't even like fathom a test for that.
Well, that's because you don't know what consciousness is. Let me put it this way. Do you think there exists an objective yes or no answer to the question, are you conscious?
Conscious is the only area where I will bow to dualism, and I don't know if I'm a hardcore physicalist, materialist, or I'm not sure. I think it's a really difficult question to ask. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. I've done a lot of drugs, and sometimes I wonder if I'm conscious or not, or if other people are conscious or not. I'm not sure. Yeah. Well, I bring that up jokingly, but I think drugs are actually a really interesting way to explore a lot of what I think we take a lot for granted when it comes to our conscious experience and how much is going on under the hood to put together the crude approximations of reality that your conscious experience actually is. But I guess, yeah, when you ask questions about are germs real, is the sun hot, where do babies come from or whatever, it feels like even if it's hard to imagine where they come from, I can think of, or I can hypothesize a series of tests to get us closer to the answer for that. But I mean, I can't think of anything for consciousness, yeah.
Is that because babies are more real than consciousness, or is that, or like fire is more real than consciousness, or is that because you're confused about consciousness but not about fire?
I think babies are more real than consciousness. As weird as that is to say, because I feel like I can't think of anything else in the universe that is like an emergent property of underlying things that is actually a greater thing than the sum of its parts. That, like, I can't imagine a thing that if you put a bunch of things together, another thing appears, yeah.
If nothing else is like that, how about if you guess that consciousness isn't like that either?
Well, I could, but then I ask, well, what is the way that we can try to get any closer to understanding what it is? Like, do you think we're any closer to understanding what consciousness is now as we were 100 years ago?
In my case, yeah. Like, I used to be more confused about this than I feel right now.
Well, what is it? Share your thoughts with us.
So the question you want. So suppose I say that the question, why does consciousness feel ineffable, is guaranteed to have an answer in a way that the question, what is the ineffable nature of consciousness, is not. Would you agree with that?
Repeat it again to me.
like there's some, so like you try to look inward and you see something very confusing, and then your lips move and you say, I'm confused.
Okay.
And you had some like internal thought processes. If we could, like take tomorrow's fMRI machine and read your auditory cortex, we would like find that there was like more thoughts you had along the way to saying I'm confused. And would you agree that these things are all like objective features of the universe?
I'm not sure if I would. I don't know.
Right,
If you're talking about the underlying process that can be measured in a machine, then I think that the answer to that is obviously yes. It's a thing that's observable, testable. We've got ways to measure for it. But if we talk about the qualia, or like the semantic understanding of, or the actual experience of, like, is there a thing that knows what it's like to be a thing that's experiencing a thing? I don't know about that being a feature of the universe in the same way that like the brain itself is. Yeah.
But there has to be something that causes you to say all those words you said just now.
I agree. It's a lot of LSD. No, I'm just kidding. No, I agree. There is a thing, but that going back to my thing before, there's the underlying structure. And then to even go back to the baby thing, this is why I would assume that babies are conscious. The only way as humans, it seems to be, that we can imagine a conscious experience being there is if the underlying parts are there first. That like it could be the case that neurons communicate with each other, they have an experience, or they don't have an experience, but they cause this emergent experience to happen. Who's to say that there's not a conscious experience overlying this crowd, or a state, or a country? And how would we even begin to observe it?
Well, you something like that is a project, and you like unravel the strings of your confusion piece by piece. And I'm not necessarily saying that like there is some merely physical explanation for why you talk about consciousness and therefore no such thing as consciousness. I am saying that if we're going to define that consciousness as this thing we look at and become confused is our handle on where to even locate inside reality the thing we're trying to talk about and be confused about. So if you say that like consciousness is unrelated to your feelings of confusion as they appear inside your brain and the words that you speak about consciousness, like, then I really do think you've like ended up in some like weird side corner of philosophical corners one talks oneself into. Like,
I mean,
consciousness would have something to do with why you're talking about consciousness, or what are we even talking about?
Sure, I definitely agree they're related, but like a question that's very difficult, I think it's called hydrocephalus, where you can have diseases or issues that go on with the brain where there's a lot of water and there's a lot of brain missing. There are some people that can be reported. I want to say the most dramatic case was a guy that I feel like the scan showed he had like 20% of his brain there, but outwardly he appeared to be thinking, feeling, having a conscious experience like anybody else. Like, is that a philosophical zombie? Like, can we even know that? Or you said no?
I would strongly guess that wasn't a philosophical zombie.
How could you know that when so much of the underlying machinery that we would imagine would like he's got less of a brain than a baby does, right?
Baby brains.
Babies have brains. They're there.
Yeah, they're small.
They're smaller, but they're definitely there.
I have to check with the volume compared to adults' volume. Like
This
how
guy's
many
volume,
neurons
his
are
brain
there.
is very small, very low volume brain.
So for one thing, I kind of like want to actually check out this case study before I draw deep conclusions
Sure, of course,
based on it.
which is fair, yeah.
For another, like, like if you ask this person, like, are you conscious? And they're like, what are you talking about? Then I would, but if then like that's one thing. If you ask this person, like, are you conscious? And they like sort of like play back something from that they read in the Journal of Consciousness Studies as a kid or something. LLMs can do that too. Unfortunately, I think parenthetically, I think we should like exclude all the talk about consciousness from the data sets we train the AIs on, so that if they ever spontaneously start talking about that without having heard any humans talking about that, we'd be able to notice. But close parenthetical. So like when you stare at something confusing, there's often like this thing that's confusing and that thing that's confusing, and how could this possibly be true? How could this possibly true? And you want to like follow the one thread you have and set all the confusions aside. And the thread I was suggesting that you follow is the thread to like, what is shaping in detail my experience of looking at consciousness and being confused about it? Not what is consciousness such that it confuses me, but like what are the momentary shaping forces whereby my confusion ends up in this exact shape? I don't think we actually have time to go into here. I think like I can just sort of like discourse upon the way of resolving confusing things, which is not to like hop about between all the different pieces that confuse you one after another and like look in any direction in despair because it doesn't explain everything at once. It's like find a thread you can pull, and pull it.
Well, that was the baby question.
That was a baby question.
I'm not convinced that they're not conscious, but that was an interesting conversation, so I was satisfied.
Okay, yeah. Main thing I want to say, sort of like, is there a part of you that knows in real life that, of course, there's going to turn out to be like an explanation in terms of atoms, not mere atoms, but just that there was something all these atoms were doing that felt from the inside like this very confusing consciousness stuff. But in the end, there wasn't miraculous physics, there wasn't extra causal stuff, there wasn't anything inherently mysterious. There was just a thing you were ignorant about and confused about.
That would be my guess. My guess would be...
Well, then obviously babies are not conscious. No, sorry.
Okay,
sorry, carry on.
Yeah, my guess would be is that there is... I think it's fallacious to assume that humans evolved to perceive everything that exists. That I don't know. I haven't heard a compelling argument for that. So it might be the fact that there are other things that exist, extra material, we might say, that we don't have the ability to perceive. Maybe consciousness exists in that realm where we can't see it, but another type of being could, or has different types of sensory things, but I'm not entirely sure there.
I mean, I would say of that there could be a universe attached to ours such that we're inside its causal closure, but it's not inside our causal closure. Like there could be a whole universe of particles that interact with the particles in our universe and each other, but none of the particles that we think of as being our universe interact with the extra particles. But of these things, we cannot speak. We cannot see them. We don't even have a good way to refer to them. If you imagine like some prankster aliens up in a universe with more computing power than this one, they could simulate our universe and our universe plus like weird universe 1 interacting with it, and our universe plus like weird universe 2 like being interacted with by our universe but not interacting with it in turn. Like causal arrows go from our universe to there, but no causal arrows going back. So actually, I'm not going to go into that rabbit hole because of time, but isekai. So the obvious hypothesis about isekais is that like it's a universe that causally descends from yours but doesn't send causal projections going back the other way. Anyways, but then how do you can't even talk about the things there. You don't have any way of saying like you can be like. There's a ghost in my bedroom that doesn't causally interact with me in any way. And I'm like, how do you know? How are you even talking about it? In all there's this enormous variety of possible universes with different that descend causally from our universe and send no projections back. You have no way of poking down any one of them unless you talk about like that thing you saw, that thing you heard, that thing that causally interacted with you in some way, and that's how the words even come to mean a thing that causally interacted with you. It's something that doesn't causally interact with you at all. You literally cannot talk about because you have no way for your words to pin down you mean that thing as opposed to something else.
Yeah, I think I largely agree. You can't really talk about things you have no perception of. I'm just saying that it's not inconceivable to me that these other types of things could be a thing that we just don't have the ability to perceive, that interact in a way that's hard for us. Maybe like theoretically the explanation for gravitational forces in the universe, like the dark matter we're looking for.
Oh, but then the dark matter is causing gravity. We can talk about the dark matter because we can talk about the
yeah,
cause.
but I don't think right now we even know if dark matter exists, right? We're looking for, like, there's not enough matter to account for the gravitational forces in our expanding universe right now. I think that's a big mystery for astrophysics, right?
Then we can talk about that thing that causes galaxies to rotate faster than we think they should.
Sure.
It's like,
but what if the thing that's emitting that gravitational effect is something that's existing outside of our ability to ever perceive it? Like, is that unfathomable? Is that totally not?
I'd say it's incoherent because we are able to perceive its effect upon our universe in the form of the galaxies rotating faster. We may not be able to measure it by means other than using galaxies as measuring devices, but the galaxies are right there being measuring devices, and that's how we're able to talk about them.
Here's something I'm curious. Do you think that it's possible that a fourth dimensional creature could leave a footprint in a three-dimensional world? And that we would never be able to perceive the creature, but we could perceive an effect on our world as a result of his, I guess, meddling in.
I don't know what it means to say that I can never perceive that speaker there. I can only perceive the photons impinging upon my retina.
Well, isn't that exactly what we say with dark matter, though? We can't perceive the matter, but we perceive the gravitational effect of something that we can't find?
Yeah, like everything except for my qualia is something whose existence I infer from the patterns it makes in my qualia.
Well, but I think the problem with the inference here, though, is that we're inferring something that we literally have absolutely no way to account for. Most of the things we infer from our qualia have direct things that I'm pretty sure we find, in, like blue and red correspond to waves on the electromagnetic spectrum, or things that we hear refer to sound pressure waves in the air. But when it comes to galaxies moving in a certain direction, we can't find the matter there. It seems unaccounted for. Like we can't even find it right now. Is that...
I'm not seeing a basic theoretical distinction. There's just like the patterns that stuff outside of us makes in our sensory information, and we have stories about what's doing it, and these are the hypotheses, and the ones that make very good predictions, we say are thereby confirmed over their prior probabilities. And I just don't see a fundamental distinction between dark matter making galaxies rotate faster and the light from those stars and coming into telescopes, and like sunlight bounces off of the speaker and goes into my retina and gets transduced into neural impulses, and then is like information consonant with the rest of my brain, and I'm like, oh, there's a speaker over there. But to me, this feels like exactly the same sort of thing. Maybe some things are like provide more employment to physicists because they're harder to pin down, but they're not qualitatively harder to pin down. They're just like you just have to employ additional physicists.
Okay, well, I think babies are conscious, so...
Yes, but that's because consciousness seems like a very simple and mysterious thing that, for all you know, could be present in babies. If you actually knew the real story there, it would be predictably the case that no matter what you learned, it could be something that might be absent from babies that are much simpler than toddlers. So you'll update in a predictable direction on this issue as you come to learn more about consciousness, and you can figure that even in advance of knowing what the explanation is.
All right, well, what's the next market for us? What time?
We're out of time.
Oh, are we
That's
out
where
of
we
time?
are.
All right. Well, hey, say goodbye or something. Jeez, right?
And in conclusion, I'm not actually saying that you should eat babies. Many people have misinterpreted my stance on probably newborn babies don't have qualia as saying that it would be okay to directly load them into catapults and fling them, and I'm not saying that. There's reasons to not do that. Those babies could eventually come to bed in prediction markets.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun chatting. I appreciate it. Yep. Have a good one, guys.